This is Sony Xperia 5V, which is released in 2023. This is Sony Xperia 5.2, which is released in 2020. If I ask an average person which one is more new, they would probably guess that this one is more new because it is more slick. It has 3 cameras on the back, whereas the newer version just have 2 cameras on the back and it just looks a bit shinier. Today, we'll focus on Sony Xperia 5 Mark II, and I will tell you why this flagship phone, even after 3 years, can be the right choice for your consumption. You don't always need to buy the latest phone that is probably 2 to 3 times higher the price tag than the old flagship phones. Even though I'm reviewing Sony Xperia 5 Mark II, the review also holds for Sony Xperia 5 Mark III, as they are very similar products. The only difference is that the CPU of Sony Xperia 3 is slightly better than the CPU or computational power of Sony Xperia 2. At the same time, Sony Xperia 2 have less of a throttling issue than Sony Xperia 5 Mark III. In computer science, there's a law called the Moore's law. Moore's law is the observation that the number of transistors in an integrated circuit doubles about every 2 years. In the old times, it meant whenever you upgrade your computer, you will get almost double the power that your previous computer had. At the same time, there's another term called diminishing return, which means there's already a point that something is so good that it's really hard to add more value to it. My personal feeling is that mobile phones already got to that level. It means after 3 years, my Sony Xperia 5 Mark V is not significantly better than Sony Xperia 5 Mark II. As an average user, or even as a power user, I don't notice any difference between these two phones on a daily basis. Yes, the camera of the new phone is slightly better. There is like more lights getting into the system and the sensors. Yes, the CPU is better. I feel a slight difference in how responsive the phone is. But all in, it's not that easy to tell the difference between these two phones. In fact, I like the design of Sony Xperia 5 Mark II or Sony Xperia 5 Mark III better than Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. I will tell you why. It's a bit slicker than Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. The reason is because the battery is lower than the 5000 mAh battery on the Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. Even though I enjoy my new Sony a lot, on a daily basis, I notice the heaviness of the device, even though my hands are not particularly small. If you watched so far into the video, I have asked for all of you. Currently, I have around 280 subscribers. Thank you all of you for subscribing into the channel. I have a goal to increase this amount to 1000. Below 1000, I cannot monetize the YouTube channel. And shooting videos have some cost. For example, I'm paying for Adobe Suite, which is quite costly. And also I'm paying for some equipment for shooting the videos. It would be great if you can potentially subscribe to my channel. It helps me a lot. It's very meaningful to me. And thank you in advance. The other thing is that this phone has a marvelous display and also really nice dual speakers in the front. It's still very responsive. It has 120 Hz display, which is quite nice. My new Sony is not more than that. It's also 120 Hz. And also it has all the things that the other Sony phones, new Sony phones or older Sony phones have. It has a dedicated shutter button. It has the fingerprint scanner as the power button. It has the volume keys. It has a headphone jack. And there are 3 cameras on the back, NFC sensor. And the most important thing is that the SIM card is a dual SIM. You can put also a SD card in it, and you don't need any extra tool to open the tray. The other thing that you may want to know when you want to buy a new phone is that how the performance is if the phone is a bit older. So in 2023 and 2024, this phone has a perfect performance, no throttling, no lagging issue, gaming cannot be easier. The performance is great. I never had any issue with it. It is very smooth. I can do multitask if I want to. There is this option that is called multi-window, for example. You can have two applications running at the same time. You can watch YouTube while doing some productivity work, or you can have a phone call while at the same time being in a meeting, for example. And I never ever had a performance issue, even in 2023, late 2023, which still holds for 2024 too. The other thing is that the camera is just amazing. Sony Xperia 5 Mark II was the first phone that convinced me I can finally move from my DSLR or mirrorless to a camera of a phone. Even though on special occasions, I still carry my mirrorless or DSLR camera in a lot of situations. For example, when I'm traveling for the weekend, I don't bring my DSLR camera anymore. And instead, I use the Photo Pro app. The thing about Sony phones is that the camera result is very, very similar to what you expect from a normal camera like a DSLR or mirrorless. Unlike the other flagships, like how the camera result from Pixel or from Apple looks like, Sony does the minimum amount of processing. Even though maybe for the average user or on your phone, that minimal processing is not always look as nice as an iPhone, when you use Lightroom or other applications, that lack of processing gives you lots of power to play around the picture. For example, here you can take a look at some pictures that I took with this phone over the 3 years. As you can see, the details are enough. The pictures are sharp. The dynamic range is perfect. And in fact, I took some pictures with this phone that I would never imagine to take with any other phone, because how much control I had over the shutter speed and over other manual settings. In terms of software for the camera, Sony provides two applications. One is called Cinema Pro and the other is called Photo Pro. For example, we can look at the Photography Pro together. The nice thing about Sony phones is that there's a dedicated shutter button. The volume keys work as zoom in and zoom out. The interface of this phone, as you can see, is very similar to Alpha series of Sony camera line. With half a shutter button, I can focus on the subject. You see there's eye detection also. And when I click, then it takes the photo. There is an auto mode, but you can also change to other modes. For example, in the manual mode, you can change the shutter speed. And there's a program mode that you can change the ISO, the lighting, and some other settings, for example, autofocus. There's another application called Cinematography Pro, which gives you really nice result if you want to do videography. You have, for example, control over your white balance. You can have some artistic profiles. And there's autofocus. You again have control over the shutter speed, the frame per second, the resolution, which can be changed from 4K to 2K. The other things that maybe is concerning to you when you want to buy a phone that is a bit older than 1 or 2 years is the durability of this phone. I dropped this phone hundreds of times. There is no scratch on the back or on the sides. It never broke. I never had any problem. There's just one single problem that you should be aware of, and that's the fingerprint scanner. In a lot of units, it doesn't work as intended after a while. The same happened to my unit. So right now the fingerprint scanner sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. It's really annoying. You can change the fingerprint scanner for 40 or 30 euro. It's not that costly. At the same time, I understand if this is not something you want to do. It's very unfortunate that Sony didn't fix the problem in this line, even though the problem existed in the previous lines too. The other things that I really like about Sony phones is that how clean the UI is. There is no bloatware. As you can see, there is just Call of Duty installed for whatever reason. Facebook, Netflix are the only non-Google applications, and also some applications from Sony itself. The other thing about Sony phones is that if you go to display, you have an option to go to creators mode. It gives you a bit of a warmer look, but at the same time it's much closer to what you actually see. In the standard mode, you get some poppy colors. The images look a bit sharper, but it's not necessarily what the creator intended you to look at. The other things that is really nice about Sony phones, especially if you want to buy a used phone, is that you can go to battery setting and there is a lot of options. For example, one of them is the stamina mode. It automatically puts your phone on the stamina mode when you go, for example, below 10 or 20%. The other thing that I really like is the battery care. It is just on Sony phones. For example, when you're charging your battery, it doesn't charge it fully. When you put it overnight, it charges it gradually, and it will be fully charged exactly when you wake up. And the battery care automatically detects your sleeping schedule. One more feature that Sony phones have, including Sony Xperia 5 Mark II and Sony Xperia 5 Mark III, is a game enhancer. There are two particular features that I love about game enhancer. The first feature is the game mode. So in the game mode, you can change whether you want to have a performance preferred, you want it to be balanced, or you want it to be battery preferred. The other things that I really enjoy having is that you can basically have a focus setting. You can turn off your adaptive display or disable the side sense or disable the camera key when you're playing or hide call notifications. And more importantly, there is an option called HS Power Control. What it means is that when you are like gaming and you're charging at the same time, your phone will act like a console. It uses the power directly to power the game and the phone, and it doesn't always charge the battery, then decharge it whenever you're like playing the game. Also, the performance of gaming on this phone is amazing. I personally didn't notice any difference between Sony Xperia 5 Mark II, for example, to Sony Xperia 5 Mark V. So now that I talked about all the positives of this phone, I would like to also talk about the negatives. So as I mentioned, the first problem is the fingerprint scanner is not always working. If the phone is a bit older, you may need to replace it. So the other problem that I have with this phone is that you don't get new Android updates anymore. It can be a potential issue for you if you are really into getting the latest and newest Android updates. It's not something that particularly bothers me, but this is something that is there. Right now, Apple and Samsung are doing a better job at updating their software compared to Sony. And they are the only two issues that I find with this phone. Everything else is perfect. Frankly, I had a really hard time to convince myself to upgrade to a new phone, even though the new phone is already 3 generations older than my Sony Xperia 5 Mark II. And this is something that I would consider keeping for a longer time, even more than 3 years. I think this phone can easily work for another 2 to 3 years for me. And this is the quality that I always expect from Sony. All the Sony phones that I have are still working, even the ones from 6 or 7 years ago. After I use them for a couple of years, I usually give it to family and friends for free. And I think this phone, after I give it to a family member or friend, is gonna work also for 2 or 3 years. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the like button. I'm gonna review a new phone, Sony Xperia 5 Mark X, next week. Please stay tuned and see you in the next video. Bye!